Hi, if you've been wondering whether to put on your side borders or your top borders onto your quilt, you are not alone. So I am about to answer that question for you. And if you have been wondering how to put them on anyway, you're not alone in that question, and I'm going to answer both of those questions for you. I am Kim, this is Quilt with Kim. You are very welcome. Let's switch camera and get right onto it. So here we are on my dummy quilt. This is actually an orphan block that went a bit wibbly wobbly, so it was sat there with no home to go to. So to answer the question, which do you put on first, your side borders or your top borders? I tend to follow the rule that we put our side borders on first, like that. We stitch those on and then we put our top borders on. So if that's the only question you needed, that's it. However, stick around because there's one little thing that you probably need to know about when you're putting on your borders. So let me cover that next. So if you want to know how to put on your borders, stick around because I'm going to show you exactly what to do. So first things first, when you are measuring up your quilt, as is demonstrated here, what happens when you're stitching all our pieces together, it can go wibbly wobbly. It happens. Happens to all of us, including me. So what we are going to do, so this is a block, yes, and you would do the same whether it's a block or an entire quilt, if I can get my words out. We are going to measure, but we're not going to measure the sides and we're not going to measure the tops and the bottoms. We are going to measure across the middle because what we want our borders to do is to get it all straight. This is the same as well if you are putting your framing strips on a quilt as you go quilt. This is the same technique. You need to measure across the middle. If you've watched a lot of my videos, you'll know that this is a rule that we all need to follow. So in this particular instance, if I measure, we can see that it's pretty much 12 inches across the middle that way. And if let me switch that around so you can see. And if I measure it across the middle that way, it's 12 inches. Okay, so it's a little bit out, but that doesn't matter. So we use our borders to straighten it up. So that's the first thing that you need to do is measure across your middles to get your actual measurements, because when we cut to those measurements and we put our borders on, we can square it all up. So when you've got your finished block or your finished quilt, it won't go all a bit on the huh, and that is a technical description. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to put our side borders on. So I'm going to have that way with my zigzags going down from the top to the side. Okay, so I'm going to turn that so it's easy to pin. I have already cut these strips to size. So this is a 12-inch strip. So your border, so we know that this was 12 inches across the middle in this particular direction. I would cut my border to that 12 inches. Let's pretend that it sticks out a little bit at the edge. I'm going to exaggerate like that. What we're going to be using this border is to pull it all into the square. Okay, so whatever your measurement across the middle, you pre-cut your borders to that size. Don't just run your fabric along because you'll end up with a bit of a wibbly wobbly quilt. Okay, so we are going to pin the ends first. So I'm going to get one end and line it up nicely at the corner. Okay, like that. And then I'm going to get the other end and pin it onto that corner as well. Now, if you're new to putting on borders, it's probably a good idea to practice on a small block like this. Okay. So I've pinned both edges. Now we're going to pin in the middle, and this is why it's one of the reasons that it's really good to practice on a small block, because if you've got a great long quilt, it can be a bit tricky on your first go to try and find that middle. So get used to how it all works on a small quilt. So to find my middle, this is the same technique with a big quilt as well. I pinch the end, I pinch the end, I pull. Whoops. I hold it taut and I find the middle. I make sure my raw edges match up. I'm holding this middle with this finger here. I'm holding that middle, and now I can pinch it and I can put a pin in it. Okay, and then we're going to do the same between the middle pin there and the end pin there. So I'm going to just pull those just slightly taut and pop a pin in the middle. And then again over on this side, I'm going to hold that taut, hold that down, pull that slightly tight so I can find the middle. By pulling it tight, you're helping your border to really straighten out, to help your quilt itself straighten out so everything matches and straightens. Okay, so that's one border. Let me show you on the other side. So I'm going to turn it round, get my other border. This is obviously right sides together. This is a solid fabric. So as a little tip, solid fabrics, which are the plain fabrics. So plain fabrics in quilting are called solid. And they're called solid because the fabric is dyed all the way through, okay? Which is unlike your standard fabric. This fabric is printed on top or dyed on top, so we have a definite right side and a wrong side. On plain fabrics or solid fabrics, it's the same both sides, so there's no right or wrong side. But if you did have a right side, it would be right sides together. So we're going to do this the same way. We're going to pin one corner, like that, and then pin the other corner. We'll get these first because then that helps to square up your quilt or rectangle up your quilt. Can you say rectangle up? I don't know. So I'm going to hold the ends, I'm going to hold this end, I'm going to put it taut so we can find the middle, get some pressure on it and stick a pin in it before it changes its mind. Hold that down, give that a little tug, find the middle, making sure we're matching the raw edges. And then same thing again, over here, hold the middle, hold the end, put it taut and stick a pin in it. That is a very bent pin. You probably can't see on camera. I have no idea why I have a bent pin. So having pinned those in place, the next thing that we're going to do is stitch down each side 1/4 of an inch. So I'm going to go on pause. I'm going to do that off camera. You know how to stitch 1/4 of an inch, and then we'll meet back here in just 1 millisecond. All stitched on then with 1/4 of an inch seam down both sides. So having done that, the next thing that we need to do is press your borders out to the edges, but what we're wanting to do is make sure that we've pressed the seams to the outside. Now I know normally we follow rules about your seams going to the dark side in patchwork, but there's always exceptions to the rule, and when you put on borders, that is one of those exceptions. So we're going to press with our seams laying outwards towards the border, into the border. Okay, so let me set up my iron and we're going to do that together. Now, before you ask, and before you question me, this towel is on about 8 layers of thermal wadding on my cutting mat. I would never iron directly on my cutting mat because cutting mats do not like heat. So we've got our side border on with the border facing away from us. Sorry, the little seam facing away from us. Can you see? Like that. And we're going to get our iron and we're going to open the border and we're going to press that border away. Okay, and if you want to know what this iron is, it's a little Prim travel iron, which I love. And actually it runs a lot hotter than my normal iron, like a standard iron. Okay, so I've pressed that all to one side. Then I'm going to do the same with the other side. Okay. Give it a good press. If you're a beginner, then pressing for patchwork is a bit different from ironing your clothes. We're not so much ironing when we're doing these kind of things, we're pressing into the seams. It helps them to lay flat, it helps them to get all crisp, it helps to maximise all your measurements as well. So sometimes if your measurements are slightly out, or you're looking at your finished piece thinking that doesn't quite measure where I was expecting it to be, give it a good press and really work into those seams, and you probably find that it sorts itself out. Okay, so I've given that a really good press, so we're starting to create the look that we want for our border. So let me remove my iron out of harm's way, and we're going to put on the top and the bottom borders now, so just bear with. Okay, so iron to one side. Now we're going to put on our top and our bottom ones. So I'm twizzling that just because it's easier for me to do on camera. So when we get our top and bottom borders, when you get a pattern, all the border sizes will be given to you. Now, if I lay that on there, can you see, remember at the beginning we said, if it pokes out a little bit, this is where your borders help you to square it up. So when a pattern gives your border size, that's what it's expecting your finished quilt to square up to. But as you can see here, if I pin one corner on, so let me do that so that you can see exactly what to do. Now, if you've been with me a little while and you watch my videos, you'll know that I don't hide anything. And I don't have everything completely and utterly perfect, because it isn't in the quilting world. I like to keep things real and honest and as they happen. So I'm going to pin that there. The thing is, if I don't show you all the quirky bits, then if the quirky bits happen to you, you'll think, oh, it's just me. But it isn't. It happens to all of us. Bearing in mind that we're dealing with fabric here, and fabric is a bit of a movable beast. So we need to learn how to manage it, which is why I love showing you how to sort it out and how to manage it. So I've pinned that one on the left there. Okay, so it's the same as we did before. We just pin one of the corners. But if I stretch that out, can you see how it nudges over on the right hand side? But we know that this is the correct length because that is what our pattern has told us. But don't panic. As long as it's not 3 inches over, this is only a little bit, I'm going to pin that corner into place as we did before. Okay, so that's no different. We've got a corner pinned there, we've got a corner pinned there. Then we're going to do the same as we did before. So I'm going to hold that down. I'm just giving it some pressure, and I'm going to hold this bottom left of your screen now, give it a little tug. Okay, now this will help to square up my quilt top. I'm going to stretch my fingers, hold down the middle where my middle finger is, hold it down to put the pressure on it, then I can quickly put a pin in it. Once you've got the middle one in, it tends to get a bit easier. As I said, this is why it's really good to practice on a small piece first. Then I'll just take one of the halves. So I'll hold that down. I'll give that a little tug so I'm getting some pressure. Match those edges and I'll put a little pin in it. There we go, pin in there. And I might want to put another couple of pins in the middle. We always, when we're pinning, pin the edges and then pin the middles. If you pin at one end and just keep pinning along, you'll move the fabric along, and we don't want to do that. We want to even the fabric out along the length. Okay, so I'm going to hold both ends, give it a little tug, stick a pin in the middle. Same thing here. Hold my pins, or the fabric where the pins are, stick a pin in. Okay. And then see here, because it's bagging a little bit, I'll hold the pin down. Can you see that bagging? Don't know if you can see a little, but it is there. So I'm going to hold that center pin down, hold the edge, give it a little tug, and it will all snap into place as if by magic. And with your third or fourth hand, you stick the pin in. And yeah, I think in quilting we need a few hands. Same thing again. I'm going to put the pin in here, hold the middle, hold that pin, stick a pin in. And then one last pin to go. Hold that pin down, hold that, pull it taut, and stick a pin in. Okay, so that is all ready to stitch that side. Let's do the same on this, see what's happened. So we're probably starting to square this up now, and it's probably very happy. So stick a pin in one corner, stick a pin in the other quarter. Okay, if you're sitting here bored, then scroll on through, but I know there's lots of beginners who need help, and just like I do in my live classes, I like to show you exactly what to do in real time. Okay, so hold, get in the middle, stick a pin in. I seem to have an awful lot of bent pins. I'm going to have a little pin sort out. So stick a pin in there, and a pin in there. Can you see what I'm doing all the time is I'm pulling taut, finding the middle, putting a pin in. Okay. We have a different pin. Look, this one hasn't got a head on it. I think that was one of my mum's old pins, actually. There we go. Hold those two, stick a pin in. Okay, so those two top and bottom borders are ready to stitch. So let me go and do that. I'll meet you back here in about 1 second. So it's a good job that that was off camera because my bobbin ran out. And I had to sort out my bobbin. So all stitched down either side with 1/4 inch. I'll take my pins out, and yes, I do stitch with the pins in, which is why I pin with the sharp ends, the tip, the point going to the edge, because that's the thinnest part of the pin, and your machine will slide over them. Don't whiz over pins. If you're sewing, go really slowly, and then your needle will slide over the pins. So that's all the pins out, and then just to finish off, we're going to press those top and bottoms out just as we did before with my natty temporary ironing board. Do you know, if you've been following me for a while, you'll know this is my thing. One of these days I'm going to get a proper ironing mat, and then you will be so surprised and you'll fall over. So same thing again, borders to the outside, and we'll give those a good press to the edges. Okay, I'll tell you a little story in a minute which will make you laugh. So let's just finish this off. So hold fire. It's a really silly mistake that I made quite a few years ago, before I knew how to do this, and you might feel my pain. Let me do this first. There we go. So that's all my borders are stretched out. Let's put that one to one side. Let's move my natty ironing board. I know you're jealous of my ironing board. So there we go. So that is my, I don't know why it looks really wrinkled. The camera picks up just a little movement in the fabric and it looks really crinkled. It's not, it's actually quite flat. So those are my borders. So I've chosen to have my sides on first. So generally that is the rule, that we put the sides on first and then top and bottom. Quite honestly, if you're doing a load, say you're doing blocks in your quilt and you're putting these framing strips on, as long as it's consistent, it's probably fine, to be honest, but don't tell the quilt police that. Okay, so that's that, and that is ready to be sandwiched and quilted exactly how you want. So little story before I go. Before I knew how to do this, so that was a long time ago, I had done a little cross stitch the centre panel that I wanted to go on a cushion, and I didn't know about these borders then. This was a while ago. So I painstakingly got a square of fabric, and I had to cut out a square in the middle to somehow stitch this square cross stitch picture that I'd done into the middle. It was very painful, very difficult, and I wish somebody had told me about borders. So there you go. That is how to put on borders. It doesn't matter how thick or thin they are, or how wide or narrow, you put them on exactly the same way. I hope that has helped. So I will look forward to seeing you next time. If there's anything that you would like covered, stick a comment below and I will record a video just for you. Okay, I will see you soon. Bye for now.